Over the last couple decades, China climbed up through the world ranks as it completed the fastest sustained growth of any major economy ever recorded, and now only sits behind the United States for the largest economy in the world. China's quick descent up the global pecking order had many experts projecting they could become the greatest economy in the world by as early as 2035. But all of this is now changing as the most impressive economic success story in our lifetime is in serious trouble. In this video, let's talk about what's changed for China's economy, what kind of influence they still have on the global stage, and if China is actually accelerating the de-dollarization process or not. But first, we have to talk about how the decisions that China made decades ago are having huge negative impacts today. In the early 2000s, China implemented open market economic reforms initiated in the late 1970s to shift from a centrally planned to a market-driven economy. Special economic zones were established to attract foreign investment and encourage export-oriented industries, leading to rapid industrialization and urbanization. Joining the World Trade Organization in 2001 helped facilitate China's integration into the global supply chain, making it the major manufacturing hub and exporter in the world. China actively took on foreign investment and technology transfer, boosting economic growth and industrial capacity. With a focus on promoting exports, China stockpiled foreign reserves and developed a robust manufacturing sector. Substantial investments in infrastructure, growth to the private sector development, and diversification in technology and research helped drive China's economic growth. China's goal aspirations then transitioned from an export-driven economy to a consumer-driven economy, implementing policies to boost domestic consumption and hope to benefit from rising incomes and an expanding middle class. Find out if they succeeded with this a little later on in the video. While all this was going on, China became the default leader of BRICS, which is a group of developing and emerging countries from around the world and are led by Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. As China gained more influence and became more appealing to other emerging countries around the world, many of them reached out to have China invest in their countries, which has now come at a great cost. The poorest countries around the world are facing economic instability and possible collapse due to the burden of these loans from China. The repayment of these debts is consuming a significant portion of their tax revenue, leaving them struggling to fund essential services like education, electricity, and food. Additionally, these countries' foreign currency reserves used to pay interest on loans are depleting rapidly, leaving them with just months before running out of money. China's reluctance to forgive debt and its secrecy about the loan amounts and terms have hindered other major lenders from stepping in to help. A few countries like Zambia and Sri Lanka have already defaulted on loans, leading to severe economic consequences like soaring inflation, unemployment, and widespread poverty. But they aren't the only ones. Here's a chart showing the countries that hold the most debt with China and the debt percentage of their country's income. As you can see, China has planted their seed in almost every single country in what's known as the Global South. China's approach to lending has been uncoordinated and haphazard, leading to hidden debts, questionable terms, and a lack of a master plan. The International Monetary Fund and the World Bank have urged China to forgive some debt, but China has been unwilling to take significant losses on the loans it is owed. This has led to a vicious cycle of debt repayment, stifling economic growth, and hindering the country's ability to pay off their loans. China, for one, can't forgive this debt since they are over-leveraged in other areas. What was once seen as a power move has turned into a liability for China, who needs to collect on these debts but are from countries that have no money and have no real way of paying off these loans anytime soon. Now that we have all that needed context, let's dive into how China's current economic situation looks bleak. But before we do that, I wanted to let you guys know that this is the fourth video of a 5-part series where I'm outlining the 5 founding BRICS countries and their relationship to the dollar. I've already done videos on Brazil, Russia, and India, so if you haven't seen those yet, I have them down in the description for you to watch after this one. And if you like these videos on world news impacting the United States and the dollar, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Recent data points to 3 main areas in which the Chinese economy is experiencing significant weaknesses in: the property sector, exports, and domestic demand. Let's start with the property sector. Thanks to an unprecedented wave of urbanization, Chinese house prices started to rise rapidly in the 80s. Anticipating further rises, China's real estate developers borrowed increasingly large amounts of money, and Chinese buyers poured basically all their money into the housing market. This combination of over-leveraged developers and endless speculative investment in housing eventually created a massive property bubble. Property prices in the largest Chinese cities like Shanghai are 49 times larger than the median salary making them by far the most expensive in the world. This priced out the common citizen, which caused huge housing projects to be either incomplete or inadequately empty, which sparked a huge wave of default amongst the over-leveraged developers, and it caused the possibility of home buyers who poured their life savings for a space in these locations without a plan B. Obviously, a dramatic slowdown in the property market is disastrous news for China's growth forecasts, given that it represents about 30% of all economic activity. The next weakness in China's current economy is exports. As you probably already know, China's economy depends on exports. It seems like everything we buy these days from Amazon is made in China. China sells more stuff abroad than basically any other country, which is one of the reasons it has by far the largest trade surplus in the world. Obviously, exports slumped during the pandemic when global demand was shut off by lockdowns, and it was a fair question whether China's exports would ever return to pre-pandemic levels, given all the talk of countries, specifically the United States, reducing or eliminating their business with China. In the West, the US and the EU are China's biggest export markets, so if they continue to remove themselves out of China or de-risk their business there, expect China's economy to fall further. On to the third and final weakness of China's economy, which is domestic demand. In China, domestic consumption accounts for about 1/3 of China's GDP, the lowest of any major economy, and is ranked 144th in the world. In reality, the average Chinese citizen doesn't really buy or consume that much stuff, and the Chinese economy is instead mostly driven by Chinese businesses selling their stuff to foreigners. This is in part because China actively promotes policies that allow businesses to essentially underpay their workers, because that in turn makes China's exports more competitive. And China likes other countries depending on Chinese exports for strategic reasons. In the past year or so, China have started trying to boost domestic consumption to balance out their export growth, with the hope that China's domestic market might one day provide a large enough consumer base to Chinese businesses. In terms of the dollar, China has been the most aggressive country when it comes to de-dollarization, and they seem to be leading the charge within the BRICS countries to implement a new BRICS currency backed by gold. But new reports indicate that the BRICS countries are putting this group currency on hold for now. But we will get an official answer to this during their annual summit taking place in a couple weeks. I did a video on what to expect during the BRICS summit, and that should be popping up on the screen now. As other countries around the world have also been trying to reduce their need for the dollar, they've been using the Chinese yuan as their preferred intermediary currency, including Saudi Arabia, who have started accepting payments for oil in the yuan. Even a Western world country, France, has turned to the yuan for specific transactions for natural gas. And at China's own border, the yuan has just surpassed the dollar as its most used cross-border currency. But those of you concerned with the impending dollar's doom don't have much to worry about. The dollar is still far and away the most held currency around the world, still holding close to 60% of reserve currencies globally. And for those that think China and the yuan are going to replace the United States and the dollar, are forgetting the fact that 90% of international transactions around the world are used with either the dollar or the euro. So while China technically has the second largest economy in the world, it feels pretty empty, and they're decades away from being a true economic global powerhouse. A country who can take away the reins from the United States as the largest economy in the world is India. Find out why they are perfectly positioned to do so in this video here.